To wrap up this series, I first want to recommend a developer extension tool you can add in your browser called Vue DevTools. This is a really handy utility to have at your disposal when working on Vue applications. To give you some insight of what it actually is, I have a screenshot here in the notes, but I can also show you in our FlashWord application. The way I'm going to get to it is I'm going to actually just open up my browser's web inspector panel. And then because I have this extension added, I have this additional tab Vue. And this is the Vue DevTools. Skimming through this interface, you can see all sorts of useful information. You have an outline of the Vue instances or the components within your application. And for each of them, you can see how you set that up. So you can see the data properties, you can see any watchers, computed properties that you created. All of that information's here. And then the other thing you'll see is as you're interacting with the interface and actually making changes, you'll see the data updated here. So you can kind of see what's happening behind the scenes. For example, if I enter a correct answer for this particular word card, you could see it dynamically filled in that data down here. If I hit enter, that should toggle correct to true. Right, so you can see that there. And that's just going to be really useful if you're working on an aspect of your application and things aren't working how you're expecting it. To be able to see the actual data behind the scenes can help sometimes get to the bottom of what the problem might be. Definitely something I recommend having installed and open whenever you're working on a Vue application. Coming back to the notes, the other thing I want to conclude this series with is just some general suggestions on where to go next. This has been a broad overview of Vue. We didn't really get into advanced details. We didn't cover every single detail about all of the techniques we looked at. So a good next step to follow up this series would be just to read through the official documentation that Vue provides. It's pretty good documentation. And it's one of those things, anytime you're learning a new technology, I always recommend giving a quick read through the entirety of the documentation, not with the intention of mastering or necessarily understanding everything, but just kind of preloading your brain with exposure to all the features that the technology provides, so that as you're developing and working, if you're trying to do something, you'll think, oh, I remember reading about that, or there was something related to this that I think could help in this situation. And then, of course, at that point, you would go back to the documentation and do like a closer read. But just getting that broad overview of what is provided is always a good place to start. Other points of reference, I have a link to the Vite documentation on building for production. So this is what you want to look at when you're ready to take your applications into the real world. You want to share them on a live server. Vite has build steps in there that will compile your application appropriately for that. So definitely a good next steps in terms of learning more about our Vite build system. Following that is a link to Vue Router, which is an official plugin for Vue that assists with making single-page applications. So these are websites where you have different pages, and rather than wanting to load the pages via a full request to the server, you can actually just dynamically load the content of that page within Vue and within JavaScript. So that's something I recommend if you're going beyond just building an interface portion of your application. You want the entire application and each of the individual pages to be powered by Vue. Check out Vue Router. Another kind of extension of Vue you might want to check out is something for state management. And where this is going to come in handy is as your applications grow in complexity and you're dealing with a lot of components that need to communicate data to one another, a state management system can help facilitate that. As we learned in this series, we can communicate data between components using things like events and props. But as the applications grow, that can get a little messy. So having a state management system in place can help with that. And Pinia is one particular plugin you can use with Vue. There are other options out there. So take a look around, do a little bit of research. But if you're looking for a good place to start with state management, I do recommend Pinia. Another topic I recommend digging into, and this is not specific to Vue, this is any sort of development you're doing, is just testing, right? So understanding how to write code that is testing your applications, ensuring that they are performing as expected, just so you have that quality assurance over time as you're evolving your application. And link here takes you over to a section in the Vue docs that just talks about testing in general and gives you some insight on what you should be looking at when it comes to testing specifically within Vue. And then the final thing you might want to check out is Nuxt.js. This is a framework built with Vue. And what this is going to provide is just some additional utilities and also just like a way of structuring your application based on some predefined patterns. It's going to help solve a lot of the pain points you might face when building Vue applications. Not something I recommend to start off with. I recommend getting comfortable with Vue in general first, but then if you really want to take things to the next level, if you're building a lot of websites with Vue, definitely might be worth investing some time in something like Nuxt.js. And with all of these advanced topics, definitely keep an eye out on my channel. Hopefully you will subscribe. I will be covering some of these topics in the future, building upon this foundational series. So there's still lots to learn, and I hope you will continue watching.